Welcome to Anafram Market Perspectives.
Friday market recap. Tariff twists, data heat, and our Monday picks. Welcome back. In about 5 minutes, I'll wrap the week with the S&P 500 heat map, live updates on the Trump tariff story, and the Supreme Court hearing, the data scorecard, a futures sweep, and a bonus check on QQQ plus our Monday ideas, Palantir and AMD. Let's get to it. S&P 500 weekly recap. Breadth was mixed and leadership rotated. Semiconductors cooled, with NVIDIA and Broadcom lower, and software was broadly heavy. Microsoft and Oracle finished down on the week, while Apple was roughly flat. Amazon outperformed, Google was modestly higher, and Meta lagged after earnings. In financials, money center banks held up better than insurers. Healthcare had bright spots led by Eli Lilly. Defensive sectors were choppy, and industrials traded two-way. Takeaway: leadership narrowed, volatility stayed elevated, and investors leaned selective rather than broad risk on. Trump tariffs, what changed this week? The Supreme Court heard arguments on the legality of the president's global tariffs under the 1977 IEEPA statute. Justices from both wings pressed the government's case, signaling skepticism about using emergency powers for across-the-board duties. A decision is still pending, but the tone points to a genuine question around executive authority. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he left the hearing very optimistic, while trade lawyers noted that if the tariffs are struck down, the administration could pivot to other tools, such as Section 232 on national security or Section 122 for temporary duties. Any refunds on already paid tariffs would be complicated and could take time if required. At the same time, last week's thaw with China remains active. A one-year truce, a pause on parts of the reciprocal U.S. tariffs, fentanyl-related duties reduced to 10%, China easing rare earth controls and ending probes into U.S. chip firms, and Beijing removing tariffs on U.S. farm goods like soybeans, corn, and wheat. The administration also reiterated that the most advanced NVIDIA chips are reserved for U.S. buyers. Net read, policy risk is still two-way. The truce cools tail risk for chips, metals, and shippers, but legal uncertainty keeps markets headline sensitive. Rates and data, what actually printed in the United States, ISM manufacturing, came in at 48.7 with prices at 58. Services ISM rose to 52.4, and services prices hit 70, showing sticky inflation on the services side. S&P Global's composite and services PM is firmed versus last month. ADP payrolls increased 42,000. Oil data flipped back to builds. The API showed plus 6.5 million barrels and EIA reported plus 5.2 million, with Cushing up 300,000. Overseas, the Eurozone composite PMI printed 52.5 and services 53. Steady expansion. The Bank of England held at 4% with a split vote. Japan's 10-year JGB auction cleared at 1.658%, and the BOJ minutes were released. China's Caixin manufacturing slowed to 50.6, while services held at 52.6. Canada's IVPMY cooled to 52.4. Mexico cut its policy rate by 25 basis points to 7.25%, down from 7.5. Atlanta Fed GDP now for the fourth quarter stayed at 4% through the week. Macro read, growth is resilient, services inflation remains sticky, and outside the Fed we're still seeing selective easing. Led this week by Mexico. Futures and indexes. U.S. equity futures softened into the Friday close. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 drifted lower, while the Nikkei in Europe were also weak. WTI crude hovered around $59 to $60 and Brent around $63 to $64. Natural gas firmed near 4.4. Gold held just under $4,000 an ounce and silver near 48. Treasury prices were little changed, the dollar was firm, and Bitcoin traded in a wide 101 to 107,000 range. Bonus charts, QQQ, Palantir, and AMD QQQ. On the 5-minute view, price remains below the Ichimoku cloud with lower highs and a soft MACD. First resistance is the cloud base around 614 to 615. Nearby support sits near 613. Until the cloud is reclaimed, bounces look like risk management zones rather than chase levels. Palantir results beat, earnings 21 cents versus 17, revenue 1.18 billion versus 1.09 billion. Price action stayed under the cloud with negative momentum. Supply is layered around 176 to 177. Support showed near 175. A sustained cloud reclaim would improve the long setup. AMD results beat, earnings $1.20 versus $1.17. Revenue 9.25 billion versus 8.74 billion. Intraday trend also sat below the cloud. Resistance around 240 to 241 and support near 238 to 239. Same message, wait for a cloud reclaim for higher probability longs. Game plan, stay balanced into next week. Respect policy headlines while the court deliberates. For traders, fade strength into cloud resistance on QQQ and post-earnings laggards until momentum turns. For investors, scale entries on quality AI and semi-names like AMD after stabilization, and look for Palantir on a confirmed cloud reclaim. See you Monday for the pre-market setup and fresh levels.
Thanks for watching. If you found this valuable, hit subscribe and share this with others. See you next time on Anafram Market Perspectives.